Hello, Boker Tov. Let's see if we can get through Pirkei, chapter 3 of Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. So we're picking up today with Mishnah number 16, chapter 3, Mishnah 16. Anybody who's got the Lev Shalem, we're on page 246, but if you've got any other copy, chapter 3, Mishnah 16. So we read as follows. Rabbi Yishmael Omer, Rabbi Yishmael, he and Rabbi Akiba are the two great figures during the period of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, just before and just after. So this seems to be a very simple statement. Have kal, be easy, la roche, for the head, v'noach, and easygoing, la tishchoret. We don't know what that means. We'll have to get to that. V'heve mekabel et kol ha'adam b'simcha. And you should accept, receive, greet every person with simcha, with joy. So here's how Lev Shalem translates this apparently simple teaching. Be compliant with your seniors. In other words, La Roche, somebody who's ahead of you, either in age or in position, you should be kal. You should have a easygoing manner. Not sure, is that the way? Wouldn't we have expected the word respect or honor? So exactly what do they mean by kal? Easy or light or easygoing. Then we come to and be affable with your juniors. So the way most translations have this, the people who are above you, you should have a good relationship with them. And the people who are below you, either in age or in position, if you're a rabbi, accept everyone in joy. Be kind and greet them all with a smile on your face and a pleasant demeanor. However, here's a case. Remember, we're dealing with a text that's from 2,000 years ago. And even though we're dealing in Hebrew, you would think that by now we know what all the Hebrew words mean. But the truth is, there are sometimes words in Hebrew we don't know what they meant or what they mean. And sometimes words in Hebrew take on different meanings over the course of time. So there are occasions when we read a rabbinic text, certainly a biblical text, and we are stumped. And you will often find translations or interpretations that say very different kinds of things. You should be aware, for instance, that when we're talking about dictionaries, that there are biblical dictionaries, Bible dictionaries of the Bible, just right, Hebrew dictionaries just about the Bible. And then we have dictionaries that are just about rabbinic literature. And then we have modern Israeli dictionaries. So you could have many, many different kinds of dictionaries in Hebrew that refer to different periods, different texts. So I want to look at this word, tishchoret, okay, and what it means. Now, since we're dealing with a rabbinic text, by rabbinic we mean 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th centuries, dealing with the Mishnah, the Midrash, the Talmud, etc. So the classic dictionary that we use for rabbinic literature is often called the Jastro, and it's technically a dictionary of the Targumim, the Talmud Babli, and Yerushalmi, and the Midrashic literature, compiled by Marcus Jastro. And it goes back to the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And this is the classic dictionary when you're studying Talmud and you want to know what does a word mean. What did it mean in the Talmud? Because it often might mean something different today. And this is in a case with Tishchoret. So if we look up Tishchoret in the Jastrow dictionary, we find that there are a couple of different definitions. And number one is early manhood or youth. Okay, so where did they get that idea? How do we know that Tishchoret means youth? Where does that come from? So always in Hebrew, try to reduce a word to the three-letter root. The word shachar or shachor means black. Shachar means dawn. So either the dawn of a person's life, in other words, when they're young, or Tishchoret could mean youth, when the idea was when their hair is still black. When they get older, their hair is going to turn gray and white. So many people would say Tishchoret, you should be Noach la Tishchoret. You should be affable. You should be easygoing with youth, with young people. Don't be too strict, right? That's the idea. But if we check, we see that there's another definition in Jastrow for Tishchoret. And here it's search for young men. What does that mean? And then they say conscription. In other words, and remember, we're dealing in the 2nd century, and we're dealing with a time of Roman persecution. And one of the things that the Romans probably did was to round up young Jews and put them to work. You know, whether it's like in Ben-Hur, they send them to the salt mines, or they put them rowing in one of these Roman boats. So the idea is that Tishchoret, yeah, maybe it originally dealt with youth, but it was the idea of conscripting young Jews to be pressed into labor for the benefit of the Romans. Now, if that's the case, then what we have here is, when it comes to Rosh, not your teacher, but government, the people, the Romans, you should be Kal. In other words, we Jews have already in the year 70 and then in the year 132, we have already gone through 2 rebellions, both failures against Rome. And so in a sense, what Rabbi Ishmael perhaps is saying is the way to deal with oppression and persecution is go easy, because we don't have the power to defeat our enemy. He's too powerful for us. Therefore, you need to go easy. And the second one, the Noach la Tishchoret. If you're rounded up, or your children are rounded up for conscription, right, instead of trying to fight or run away or argue, it's not going to work. It's only going to get you in trouble. So therefore, what you should do is be Noach, is just deal with it. Go along. That's the best way to overcome the Romans and their power. Just go along. So we have 2 possible explanations of this seemingly simple Mishnah on him. Go easy on him. And when you're dealing with your own students, don't be too strict. And you should greet everybody with simcha. Or we could see this same words, same Mishnah, as being a kind of a strategy to deal with the Romans. That, you know, how do you deal with the government? You just go along. And how do you deal with conscription of young people pressed into labor? Don't fight back. it's not going to get us anywhere. And in fact, the way you should deal with all people, not only ours, but theirs, is with simcha. You know what? Have a smile on your face. If you go around and you present yourself as an angry person, they're going to see you as the enemy is going to see you as their enemy. They're going to round you up, and it's not going to work good for you. So we have two opposite possibilities here. Rabbi Yishmael is teaching us how to deal with people in the yeshiva. Rabbi Yishmael is dealing joke, which could be either laughter or jesting. The kalut rosh and levity. Kalut, same word we just had. Kal meaning light, easy. If you have an easy head, right? You don't take anything seriously. Lewdness, and in Hebrew it has the connotation of some kind of sexual inappropriate behavior. And so he's worrying that if you hang around with the wrong people and if there's not a sense of seriousness, masoret, tradition, is a siyag. It is a fence, a protection, la Torah, for the Torah. We've seen in the very beginning of Pirkei Avot that idea about a fence around laws, right, may very well be commanded by God, whereas customs are things that our people have taken on. Now, sometimes customs become as important to people as law. Technically, they're really not. But here, Rabbi Akiva is saying, you know what, we should respect traditions because they're a kind of a fence around the Torah. Even though they may not come from God or may not come from the Torah itself, maybe it's traditions that our grandparents or their grandparents came up with. Doing them, following them, respecting them is a way of hanging on and protecting the whole corpus of Jewish observance and ritual. Then he tells us, ma'asrot siag le'osher, that tithing is a fence for wealth. Here we go counterintuitive. If you have money and you give it away, you have less money. But one of the things that the rabbis teach us is that if God has given you wealth, by giving it away, giving parts of it away as tzedakah, as charity, or as ma'aser, as a tithe to the temple or to the priests, this is a way of preserving your wealth. God sees that you're keeping it all for yourself, he's not giving you any more. On the other hand, if God sees that you've been given something and you share a tenth of it with the poor, God is pleased. He will make sure you get more so that you can give more. Then we read, Nidarim, vows, are a siyad la prishut. Prishut generally is understood as abstinence. Abstinence, whether it's sexually or whether it's enjoying pleasures in life or eating certain kinds of food that are tasty and delicious, okay? There are many people, especially in the generation and two after the destruction of the temple, who said, how could I possibly eat meat now that the temple has been destroyed? And so they would take on themselves this notion of abstinence. And here we're being told that nidarim, making a vow, right, is a kind of a siyag, a boundary, a guard, a fence against or to deal with abstinence. Rabbis didn't think that abstinence was a good idea. In Christianity, of course, this notion becomes very important. But in Judaism, we always affirmed the world and physical pleasures. And here we're perhaps being told it's too easy to become so pious that you're not going to engage in any kind of luxuries or physical pleasures. And maybe the way to prevent yourself from going overboard is by, if you're going to do that, you need to make a neder. A neder was a vow, and today we could say, I swear I will, or I vow that I will. But we don't really take that very seriously. A neder was considered really serious. If you took a neder, it was a technical, formal declaration using the name of God, right? That I hereby declare that I will not eat meat anymore, or drink wine, or cut my hair, or shave, all of those things. And people were very reticent, hesitant to take a vow because you were invoking God. And maybe I believe in it right now. Maybe I'm, pushed to take on this act of piety. But maybe tomorrow I said, what was I thinking? This is crazy. But on the other hand, I've now taken a vow. So people were very, they hesitant to make a vow. And here we're being told maybe this is a good way to make sure that you don't go overboard in this kind of life of abstinence. Before you do any of that, you're going to take a vow. Well, I'm not taking a vow, right? I don't take that lightly. Okay, good. That's a good thing. And finally, another thing that's counterintuitive, to talk, to spread it, to teach it. But here, Rabbi Akiva would be saying, you know what? Sometimes the best way to preserve knowledge is keep your mouth shut, right? And we often, in English, we have the phrase, better to keep your mouth shut, and people think that you're a fool, than to open your mouth and let you know it. You don't need necessarily to tell everybody how smart you are. You have knowledge, you teach your students, but you don't got to be going around as a know-it-all. We move to the next Mishnah, Yud Chet, Hu Haya Omer. This is Rabbi Akiva, and he says, Chaviv Adam, human beings were beloved. They're lucky. They're special. They're blessed. Why? Shenivra B'Tselem, because they are created in the image of God. Dogs are not created in the image of God. Fish are not created in the image of God. Only human beings are. We're on a higher level than all other living things. So that's the first part. And then it says, Chiba Yetera. It's an even greater notion of being blessed and beloved. Nodat lo shenivra b'tselem. That a greater level, not only that they're created in the image of God, but they were told you're created in the image of God. How do we know this? Shenet Emar, it says in the image of God were human beings created. So here's a very interesting teaching. It's an even higher level to tell them that you love them. I don't need to tell them. I can show them by the way that I act. You know what? People need to hear it. And so Rabbi Akiva is dealing with this basic thing. It's one thing to be loved. It's another thing to be told that you're loved and how important it is. God told us that we were important. We were created in His image. God went the next step. And He told us that fact. Okay, it goes on. Chavivin Yisrael. So we were talking about human beings. Now we talk about the Jewish people specifically. Chavivin Yisrael. They are beloved. They are lucky. They are blessed. Shenikra'u banim lamakom. The Jewish people are called the children of God. Chiba Yetera. It's even a higher blessing, nodat lahem, that they were told shenikru banim lamakom, that they were told that they are God's own children. How do we know that? Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 1. Banim atem ladonai Elohechem. God said through Moses to Israel, you are children of the Lord your God. Okay? And then finally, we're told, Chavivim Yisrael shenitan lahem kli chemda. Jewish people were triply lucky that they were given an incredible treasure. What is the treasure? It's the Torah. Chiba yetera nodat bahem shenitan lahem kli chemda. It's parents pass on an heirloom to the children, not just a family heirloom, but indeed a real treasure. But the kids never knew that it was worth something, right? To be told, they may just say, I don't like it, it's ugly, and throw it out. And that's the end of it. To be told, I'm giving you a family heirloom, and you should know that this is priceless. This is worth an incredible amount of money. Well, that's the additional favor that happened. And how do we know this? From the book of Proverbs, chapter 4, verse 2. Ki lekach tov natati lochem. God says, I have given you a wonderful gift, a precious inheritance. Torati, it is my Torah. Al ta'azov, do not forsake it. We continue with chapter 3, Mishnah 19. Again, we assume Rabbi Akiba, and we're told again another disconnect here. Hakol tzafui, everything is foreseen. V'harashut nituna, and nevertheless, freedom of choice is granted. Now, how can you have that both ways? That God knows what you're going to do. Everything, right, has already been the ability and the freedom and the choice to do this, to do the opposite. So question is, how is this possible? This is two opposite things. So one explanation that's very lovely is that, first of all, God knows what you're going to do. You have the right to do what you want, but God knows what you're going to do. Imagine a parent or imagine a teacher who asks a question and pretty much knows what they're actually be able to figure out, what that particular child is going to, how they're going to respond. So maybe that's one answer. There's another one that's a different explanation, when it says hakol tzafui, everything is foreseen. Okay, it doesn't mean in terms of the future; it means in terms of the present. Hakol tzafui could be everything is seen. The word tzafui is similar to the word like in Har Hatzofim, which is Mount Scopus. Mount Scopus overlooks, from Mount Scopus, you look down on the city of Jerusalem. Often when you come into Jerusalem, you go up to Har Hatzofim, Mount Scopus, and you then look down and see Jerusalem, the old city, that everything is seen, not foreseen. But you think you can get away with stuff? Somebody is always down and who sees whatever you do. You can fool people, you're not going to fool God. Right? And v'harashut nituna. Human beings are given the right. You want to screw up, you have the right to do that. Right? Know that. So it's a kind of a warning that you can make the wrong choice, but somebody's going to be watching and you're not going to get away with it. Then Akiba says, Uvetov ha'olam nidon, and that the world is judged favorably, the judge who is ignorance of deeds. We're told that on Rosh Hashanah, God puts our good deeds on a balanced scale on one side and our sins in a balanced scale on the other side. And if the good deeds outweigh the bad deeds, you are considered a tzaddik, a righteous person. If it's the other way, you are a rasha. Imagine if the balance scale is exactly even. God put all your deeds from the year on one side, good and bad, and it's exactly even. So you now have from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur to tip the scale one way or the other. And Maimonides in the Mishnah Torah from the 11th, 12th, 13th century teaches us that be careful, because the very next act that you do could be the act that tips your scale one way or the other. Then we're told this very interesting analogy. Mishnah 20. Hu haya omer, he used to say, Hakol natun ba'arevon. Here's a rabbi, a teacher of Torah, who nevertheless is relating to his listeners as though they were people in the marketplace. And so he says, Hakol natun ba'arevon. Everything is given on pledge. It's a loan, right? Life, everything you have is a loan given on pledge. You're going to have to pay it back, in other words. Umitsuda prusa al kol hachayim. A net is spread over all the living. Be careful, because you're going to be captured just like an animal is captured by a hunter. And then he says, v'hachanut ptucha, the store, the shop is open, meaning life, right? Life is a store, and it's open for business. V'hachenvani makif, the shopkeeper extends credit. So in this analogy, of course, the guy who runs the store is God, and God is willing to give you credit. You don't have to pay up front. You can pay afterwards. However, v'hapinkas patuach, there is a ledger next to the cash register. So even though you don't have to pay now, whatever you took is recorded. V'hayad kotevet, and a hand records all that you take in life, all that you do, and v'yilveh, you can do so. But we're told, v'hagabayim machsirin tadir b'chol yom. Every day, collectors make their rounds and are knocking on your door, and they want you to pay up. So you are given stuff, but eventually you're going to have to pay for it one way or the other. And there are people in life who are going to be knocking at your door expecting you to either pay it forward or to pay it back. V'nifra'in min ha'adam, they exact payment from everyone. Midato v'shalo midato, with or without your knowledge, with or without your consent. V'yesh lahem al ma sheyismochu. And if you say this is not fair, why am I being punished? The book can be opened and it can be shown to you, no, you took, you owe, you have to pay one way or the other. And we're told, v'hadin din emet, and whatever the judgment, if you're hauled before the judge because you didn't pay, we got the book to prove it, what you took and what you owe. V'hakol mitukan lasi'uda. Everything is ready. Now, here the translation says everything is ready for the final accounting. But the actual word in Hebrew is si'udah. A si'udah is a meal. And there was a Jewish notion that after death there's judgment, and that ultimately all the righteous will be invited to a si'udah. In fact, there are Yiddish folk songs that speak about the si'udah and how at the final si'udah in the world to come, we will be treated with incredible feast of food, wonderful food. So we're being told you've got to pay back what you take in life. And everything is ready, for that final banquet. You want to be sure that you're invited and that you have a place at the table. Then we're told in Mishnah 21, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Elazar, son of Azariah, says, and here we're going to see two things. We live in a world in which we speak about everything is black or white. Everything is binary. We're male or you're female. Well, today that's being challenged about, people who are gender fluid. And maybe you're a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's not either or. It could be a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It could be both. So the question is that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is speaking about, it's not gender fluidity, but about other kinds of binary things. And he wants to tell us it's not this or that. You need both. And that's, we like to see things as black and white. Don't have Torah, then you won't have a worldly occupation. V'yein derech eretz, but if you don't have a worldly occupation, in other words, a job that gives you a paycheck, ein Torah, then you're not going to have Torah. Again, he tells us, I don't want people to think you're either in the yeshiva all day or you're at work all day and you have no time for Jewish learning. If you don't have this, you don't have that. You've got to have both of them. They complement each other. V'yein chochma ein yira. And as we've spoken about this one before, wisdom versus piety, right? There are people who are brilliant. There are people who need the piety. One without the other, there's something wrong. Imein bina ein da'at. Similarly, no knowledge, no understanding. It's one thing to know facts, to be able to tell the date of the Hu haya omer. He used to say, again, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Kol shechachmato. Anybody whose wisdom is merubah, is greater than his ma'asav. Again, we're dealing with the same obsession that the rabbis had. How important is your knowledge? How important is your behavior similar to? Le'ilan, to a tree, sha'anafav, whose branches, merubin, has great heavy branches, sharashav, but its roots are mu'atin, are small. So if a tree is top heavy, but the roots are not strong or deep, comes a strong wind and the tree's going to get knocked over. That's what happens to a person who's got all this stuff in his head, but he doesn't have good deeds. Okay? So the good deeds are the roots. The wisdom is the branches on the top. And how do we know this? He quotes Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 6. Shene'emar, v'haya ke'arar ba'arava. Such a one is like a desert scrub that never thrives, but dwells unwatered in the wilderness, in a salty, solitary land. Okay? Aval, kol shema'asav merubim. But a person whose deeds are more significant, heavier, greater, mechachmato, than the wisdom. L'mahu domeh, what is he similar to? Le'ilan sha'anafav mu'atim, he's similar to a tree whose branches are not so heavy. V'sharashav merubim, but its roots and blow on him. Ein mizizototo mimkomo, doesn't move him from his spot. Shene'emar, Jeremiah 17:8. V'haya ke'etz shatul, he is like a tree planted by the waters. spreading its roots by a stream. Untouched by scorching heat, its foliage remains luxurious. It will have no concern in a year of drought and will not cease to yield fruit. So there, once again, we've had so many rabbis are dealing with how important is it to learn? It's very important. How important is it to work? It's very important. How important is it to act in a certain way? Very important. And so all of these things have to be brought together into the calculation. Speaking of calculation, we have the final Mishnah in chapter 3. And here we have Rabbi Eliezer Chisma. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer Chisma teaches the following. And here the question is, what constitutes the appropriate curriculum for a serious student? And we're told, Kinim ufitchei nida, hein gufei halachot. So translation here is, the laws relating to sacrifices of birds and to the calculation of menstrual days are the essentials of halakha. So what are these two realms? Kinim and nida. So kinim, literally the word is nests. And the question is, what happens to a woman who becomes ritually impure during the time of the temple? If she's ritually impure, she can't come into the temple precinct. She can't offer a sacrifice. She needs to become purified first. One of the ways that a woman would become purified would be to offer the sacrifice of a dove. What would happen if you have two doves for two different kinds of sacrifices? One dove was designated for this kind of sacrifice. The other dove was designated for a different kind of sacrifice. And then the doves got mixed up. You forgot which one was which. Now, you had already made a designation before God. I hereby declare that this dove, now that there was a mix-up, there was a mistake that was made. And so there is a section of the Talmud called Kinim that deals with these very esoteric but complicated matters. Next, we have the issue of nida. According to the Torah, when a woman is menstruating, she is considered impure and is not allowed to have relations with her husband. What's supposed to happen? Initially, biblically, she was supposed to wait until she stopped bleeding, and then she went to the mikveh and she became purified. But for whatever reasons, Jewish women, or the rabbis told Jewish women to take on an additional stringency. So certainly during the days when a woman was bleeding, she was not allowed to have relations. The stringency was that once she stopped bleeding, she had to wait 7 days in which there was no blood. And then, and only then, she could go to the mikveh and then resume relations. Well, a couple of things are interesting here. If a woman, on the average, bleeds for, let's say, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, and then has to wait an additional 7 days when she's not bleeding, that will bring her in her menstrual cycle to exactly the point where she is most fertile and likely to get pregnant if she has relations with her husband. So today, this is the way that what's called family purity is observed. A woman, waits until she's no longer bleeding and then waits 7 additional days. So that's the laws and the traditions and the custom. Then the end of 7 clean days, she goes to the mikveh and then resumes relations for the next 2 weeks. They're permitted with her husband until the menstrual cycle starts all over again. Here's the problem. Menstrual cycles, so I'm told, can become very complicated. The idea is that a woman could bleed and then stop, and then there could be traces of blood after there was a day. Is the blood that appears, the staining that may appear after a couple of clean days after the period, is that the same kind of menstrual blood as in the beginning, or is it something different? Again, these things, the birds, figuring out how to deal with the birds, or figuring out all these complex things about a woman's menstrual cycle, this is part of the essence of law. By the way, in the Orthodox world, there's a great debate about whether women can become rabbis. Most of the Orthodox world says no. The left, most liberal element of modern, the Orthodox world, where they don't accept female rabbis, they have accepted the notion that, sometimes women know more about menstrual cycles than men do, right? They live it as opposed to the men who could only read about it. And so within the Orthodox world, there are a woman had this issue. She was bleeding, then she stopped. Then she found traces of a stain or blood, right? Maybe she's not going to be comfortable going to her rabbi and asking him about it. Believe it or not, in some parts of the Orthodox world, a woman would bring her underpants to the rabbi and show him, look, this is what I've got. And he was supposedly, by virtue of his knowledge and studying the Talmud, could tell by the color and by the volume of the stain, whether, what exactly was this part of the initial menstruation or something different, right? Women would probably not be comfortable. And so therefore, within the Orthodox world, you have these yoatzot, these women who study this and who learn these things. And women would go to another woman, a yoetzet, who would help them to figure these things out, making them much more comfortable than having to go to the rabbi. Many women would just say, this is too embarrassing. I'm just going to wait. No relations this month. I'm going to wait till next month, and hopefully things will be Orthodox community. And then the Mishnah ends after having told us about the birds and about the bleeding. We read the following: Tikufot, which means seasons, study of equinoxes, the gematriaot, and mathematical calculations are paraot l'chachma, are considered peripheral, ancillary, not in the same category. Gematria is very interesting. It's what we would call Hebrew numerology. Every letter of the alphabet has a numerical equivalent. So Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, etc. And that's how you get Chai equals 18, right? Why do we give a gift or a donation of $18 in multiples? Because 8, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet. A Chet is the 8th letter of the alphabet, and a Yud, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud, is the 10th letter of the alphabet. You put a chet and a yud together, not as letters, but as numbers, and it's 8 plus 10, 18. And of course, if you put them together as letters, it spells the word chai, which means life. So therefore, in gematria, when we give a gift of $18 or a donation, it's a kind of a silent wish that may you be blessed with life. And if $18 is not enough, so double chai, triple chai, 72, all the way up to $1,800, etc. And there's an entire realm of literature in which word by that number, right, from that word, what that might equal. Or by adding up the letters and figuring out what that word is, and it equals, let's say, 272. And if you can find another word, totally different, that also adds up by rearranging letters to 272, then that word and this word, fascination of gematria. But what Rabbi Eliezer is telling us is that's a game, right? Yes, it may be more interesting. It may be more open to people than this whole business about menstrual cycles or birds from nests and which bird and what do you do under certain circumstances. He's telling us that Jewish law is a serious business, right? And that you need to remember what's critical and what's not critical. I got to tell you that in the realm of mourning, sometimes we get so involved with what's custom, what's secondary. We think that that's the critical thing, as opposed to what's really important. So people want to know at the end of Shiva, when you walk around the block, do you go to the left or do you go to the right? And the people who ask this question, it's as if it makes a difference. When I walk out, what if the block is too long? What if it's a short block? How long is a block? Do I go to the right? Do I go to the left? Right? What if it's raining out? Right? All of these kind of questions. Ultimately, those things, in people's minds, they're critical. But from the point of view of Judaism, those things are secondary. Right? There are more important issues that sometimes we pass over, right? Like, for instance, Shiva, we'll just do a day or two. Or Kaddish, traditionally, halachically, we're supposed to recite it twice a day for 11 months. People don't see those as the critical things, but which way around the block, do I walk? How long do I wear the ribbon? All of those kinds of questions. So that brings us to the end of chapter 3. Next week, we'll pick up with Pirkei, chapter 4. A reminder that tonight we have Yom Tov services. Wednesday and Thursday, the 7th day, the 8th day of Passover. Remember that Thursday will be Yizkor, one of the important things that people look to observe about the holiday and connecting with our relatives. So we wish you a good Yom Tov and all the best, and hope to see you live streaming during the holiday.